Hey tea friends, today let's explore the Banzhang villages, home of some of the strongest tasting as well as expensive tea in the world, known to some as the king of pu'er. While the tea's potent flavor, aroma, and amphetamine effect on the body can be legendarily unforgiving, the stewards of this area's ancient tea culture are some of the most soulful and hospitable around. Today, we'll touch on 4 out of the 5 Banzhang villages. Let's begin in the most southerly, the Bulang village of Lao Man'e. Hey tea friends, welcome to Lao Man'e. This is the oldest Theravada Buddhist village in China. We're right on the border of Myanmar, and this is the southernmost of the Banzhang villages. So we've got Lao Banzhang, of course, New Banzhang, Tin Banzhang. We've got Bakanan, Bakalong, and we have Lao Man'e. And this might be the strongest flavored pu'er tea of all of them. Very, very strong flavored, bitter tea. Incredible Lefroy of pu'er tea, if you will. Behind me, you can see the monastery here, and Lao Man'e has about 14 to 1500 years of history of Theravada Buddhism. So the Pu people, the ancestors of the Bulangs that are here in modern day, settled here about 1800 to 2000 years ago. Buddhism came about 400 to 500 years after that. So incredible ancient history here in the southwest of China. Incredible tea as well. Of the handful of main tribes in southern Yunnan that are strongly linked to the tea plant, the Bulang people are widely considered to have some of the oldest ties, with some oral traditions stating they were the first to plant tea trees in these mountains around the Lansong River. In fact, many ancestral gardens in other tea mountains, now inhabited by other tribes, were thought to have been originally planted by the Bulang. Inheriting thousands of years of history of saving seeds from favored wild tea trees, the Bulang of Lao Man'e continue to tend to tea breeds that host rare ancient genetics, most notably a subspecies known for its exceptional bitterness. More on that later. All right, so we're here in Lao Man'e, and these are our two friends. They're from the monastery, and they were so kind enough to take us through a tour of their ancient tree gardens. The monastery owns and operates only, I think they said 25 to 30 mu, so that's about 5 acres of ancient tree gardens, primarily of the Tincha variety. So there's the sweet tea variety, which is the Tincha, and there's the bittersweet variety, which is the Kucha. And it's mostly the sweet tea variety. The kucha is the bitter tea is native here to Lao Man'e, but sometime in the history of Lao Man'e, there was the sweet tea variety that was introduced hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So yeah, we're here taking a tour of the ancient tree gardens and excited to drink some Lao Man'e tea later.
So Lao Man'e tea is very good.
Very good.
Yeah, very good. It's very nice, tasty.
I agree.
Wanting to learn more about Lao Man'e and its tea, we woke up early the next morning to meet village leader Wen Kun at the monastery. Having been a monk himself at one time before giving it up to start a family, Wen Kun manages many of the monastery's tea resources, as well as his own family's tea gardens. Let's start by meeting the king and queen tea trees of Lao Man'e.
Okay, so we just walked up from the monastery down there. We're now here in the Tea King Gardens with our friend Wen Kun. And his family has operated and owns these gardens around here. I believe there's at least 5 acres around the Tea King and the Tea Queen behind us here. And since the pu'er tea boom, the value of these trees has just skyrocketed. So every spring, the Tea King and the Tea Queen's tea leaves are sold and processed, usually to investors in eastern China. And after the boom happened and this value started to skyrocket, his family, headed by his mother before she died, actually recently, decreed that the value of these trees was a great opportunity to have the money just go right back into the village. So every spring, they just donate the money right back to the village, very much in the Theravada Buddhist style. All right, so these are thick trunk diameter trees. So just how old they are, probably not so sure, but apparently an expert from Beijing came a few years ago and aged these at about 800 years old. What I find really interesting is in this garden, outside of this gate with the Cha Wang and the Tea Queen, there's plenty of trees that are equal in their trunk diameter. So this is a really, really old garden. There's many specimens that probably are just as old. All right, so how much do these tea leaves actually sell for? So apparently the last year the contract was for a combination of both of these trees was $15,000 per kilo. Now, a few years ago, I think it reached almost a maximum of almost $18,000. So 15 is the lowest it's been in the last few years. But that's an incredible, substantial donation that I think is really beautiful that they're giving right back into the village each spring.
Compared to other notable tea villages in Monghai County, Lao Man'e sits at a relatively modest elevation of just around 1,250 meters. So when Wen Kun suggested we visit a wild tea garden in a nearby nature preserve he tends to, higher up in the mountains, I had to oblige. Let's go check it out.
All right, we're here with our friend Mr. Wen Kun, and he just drove us up 2,000 meters up from the village of Lao Man'e. This is the state-owned forest on top of a mountain that his family takes care of, processes tea from. He has his own tea company, he processes tea, and so we're here trying to figure out the differences visibly with Kucha, the bitter variety, and Tiancha, the sweet tea variety. Those are the two main groups that you have in Lao Man'e tea. And what we've come to find out, and I'll take this with a grain of salt because every person you talk to seems to have a slightly different take on it, but the sweet tea variety has a larger bud. The serrations, the teeth on the leaves are more jagged, whereas the Kucha are going to have that long, slender leaf that is a little floppy. So, you know, we're here trying to learn more, but in any case, the ecology here is incredibly beautiful. I love these ferns, only grows when there's a really clean environment. I'm just laughing because his face. So yeah, big floppy leaves. I believe this is going to be the bitter tea. His face kind of says it all. So let's just try it out. Yeah, you don't have that large bud. So pretty sure, just based on his face, based on the floppy leaves, based on the small bud.
你尝一下，它在这边。
Oh yeah, stings. Yeah, yeah, stings. Yeah. Oh man, there it is.
对。
Yeah. But you know, that makes really powerful bitter tea. That was kind of the backbone. God, I can't even talk because it's so bitter in here. That taste was the backbone of a lot of those state factories back in the day in the 20th century. They'd put a little bit of that Lao Man'e tea in there, and that was the so-called MSG of those recipes. It just popped all those flavors up because of that strong flavor. God, I can't even talk because it's cool. Right on.
Even though Tian Cha variety translates to sweet tea, this name seems to serve as just a functional contrast to its very bitter Ku Cha counterpart, and just like any other tea can be brewed strong to yield bitterness if desired. While most tea producers in Lao Man'e, including Wen Kun, produce their main teas with a powerful blend of Tian Cha and Ku Cha, I couldn't help but notice Wen Kun's wilderness tea has a classy, softer attack that counterbalanced the typical gut punch of Lao Man'e's overall bitter profile. Could that be due to the complexity of secondary metabolites, or the soupier, sweeter, umami-tasting amino acid content that higher elevation teas are known for? Or could it be his approach to wok firing the leaves at a slightly lower temperature, resisting the higher heat trends of neighboring villages, to produce a softer pu'er with less immediate fragrance but with more ageability? Let's continue to explore more of these trends in the teas of some of the other Banzhang villages.
All right, y'all, we're in Bakanan now. This is a Lahu ethnic minority village, but we're with Mr. Yang's son here. He's driving this little cart, and he's in the Hani group. And whereas the Lahu people might not necessarily have the understanding of how to process tea, the Hani do exceptionally. So I'm really glad that we're in this place, has wonderful tea. We'll see these tea gardens, and we have very professional tea processors processing this tea. So yeah, let's check out these tea gardens. Okay, we made it to Bakanan. This is Jilin. This is Mr. Yang's son that is in Lao Banzhang. So he's running the tea factory down in the Lahu village of Bakanan. So we're visiting here this 700-year-old tea king tree. And unfortunately, this hasn't flushed in 2 years, likely due to over-harvesting / it just being very, very old. I mean, there's an age limit. So, you know, there's this idea that there's a middle age that's the most viable. That's why I like 100 to 200 to 300-year-old gardens. And not necessarily the older the tree, the better, because you'll often get sort of like a weakened, older person energy. This is sort of borrowing from this idea in Chinese pu'er tea, that the older, not necessarily the better. But impressive tree nonetheless. In 2022 or 3, it generated about 15 kilos of fresh leaves. That's about 2.5 kilos of finished tea. And yeah, hopefully it'll live a long life. Not sure if it will be decommissioned at this point, But yeah, let's go check out some more gardens and drink some Bakanan tea. All right, so we were just checking out the Tea King up the hill, and so now we're down in this little micro garden, which I have begun to request tea from here. So I'll just wait for whenever they harvest tea from this lot, these few acres on this well-draining slope. I much prefer it because while this tree that you can see beside me is rather sizable and old, most of these trees, and we'll do sort of like this panorama of this garden, they're probably, I would say, with the girth of the trunks, starting out at 100 and probably getting up to 300 years old. And you can also check out that they're not tilling the soil. They are doing the chop and drop green manure where they go through with the hedge trimmer and just take out all the understory plants on the forest floor. But yeah, they're not doing the tilling to increase permeability to get those like early water flushes, those rain flushes for weaker tea. And yeah, I just really enjoy tea from this area. All right, so we are probably like 5-6 steeps into Bakanan. This is this year's. This is like a 5-day-old tea, and so what I really want to do is just compare this to, I think, just 10, 15, maybe 20 miles down the road, Lao Banzhang tea. So we were there day before yesterday, and the character of these teas are very, very similar. Bakanan is one of the 5 Banzhang villages, and everyone at this tea table, I've noted, has been really enjoying this tea. Yunnan just compared it to Jinjunmei, actually, and that it has this kind of honey sort of taste to it. It is very sweet. It does have that kind of leathery bootstrap like flavor of like southern Monghai in the Bulang Mountains, but it transforms into sweetness and has an immediate huigan. Perhaps that is due to it having the same brick red soil that's really rich in iron oxide that lends that surface tension and allows that astringency to transform into that sweetness, that salivation. So there's a lot of throat effects, a lot of sweetness, really good tea. I think everyone's, just judging on everyone's reactions, it's been really nice. Some people have been sweating. A lot of us just got up to use the restroom. It's just one of those teas that's just really, really strong, but really delicious and enjoyable at the same time.
Lahu Bakanan and Bakalong, so Bakanan na Lahu Balahu my no Zahala Yuan Panti Per Yo Kwai like Bakanan 我们也亲的欢迎你呀，来到巴卡诺嘿。我们是拉祜族少数民族，欢迎朋友们来到巴卡诺嘿。谢谢。
So you can't be afraid to ask. So we were just in Bakanan. This is one of the 5 Banzhang villages, and we said, do you make tea from Bakalong? Which I've never been to Bakalong. So that's the most western of the 5 Banzhang villages. So freshly just arrived into town. It's really interesting to see these new constructions. All of the houses sort of look the same. They all look pretty new. What was really interesting was that there was a lot of plantation tea through the mountain passes in between Bakanan and Bakalong. So that tells me that there is maybe a hustle to be had with perhaps faking or forfeiting, or counterfeiting rather, some tea. And there's some tea to avoid. So we're here just learning more, curious, seeing what's available, and yeah, really excited to taste some tea, maybe see some tea gardens.
As it turned out, those conventional tea plantations we saw on the way to Bakalong belonged to pu'er industry behemoth the Dai Yi Tea Company, originally the Munghai Tea Factory founded back in the 1940s. These younger plantings had uprooted many old historic gardens and reduced the actual acreage of old-growth tea in Bakalong to just a handful. Let's go check out what remains.
So one of the coolest things to see when you're in some of these ancient tree gardens is the epiphytic plants that are also in cohabitation with these ancient trees. I think this is a really good sign ecologically. We've got mosses, we've got lichens. Apparently I'm forgetting the name of this lichen, but it's the white kind of splotchy lichen that you see on all the trunks of these gardens here. This is an indicator for air quality. Critical for an ancient tree garden to thrive like this. All right, so we're here in Bakalong. These are the first pours, the first steeps here of this spring ancient tree tea. I'm already starting to speculate that it's, just looking at the color here and the leaves, that it's going to be a high heat wok sort of situation where it's going to be very sprightly, very bright. It's more bitter, but not a bad bitter, than Bakanan and Lao Banzhang, I feel like. That is a strong, almost like cabbage and meat broth. It's still got that Bulang, that southern Munghai County character. Not as much immediate Huigan. The Gongdaobei, the serving pitcher, smelled incredible, and so does this empty cup that you can kind of attribute to maybe minerals, the mineral content that gives it that residue. That liquid just has that residue on it, so it's sticky. It sticks to the gaiwan lid, the Gongdaobei, the cup, and you can just smell. So yeah, so we asked in Mandarin Chinese, she had to translate in Lahu. The question was, how hot is the wok? So this is kind of a crucial understanding when it comes to aging pu'er tea. So they said 300 Celsius, and that's about as high as I would want it. The people that are doing 350 and up, I think that's way too high. They're essentially just making what you would call pulong, or yeah, just green pu'er tea basically, without any ageability. And you can tell here with the redness of the stems, if it was all uniformly green, I mean, then it would be a little alarming, because that means they've deactivated all of the enzymes responsible for oxidation in the leaves and the stems. And here, with a few-day-old tea, you can tell that some of the enzymes that are in there are still able to oxidize, because the thicker cell walls of the stems have already oxidized. So if that heat was higher, they would have deactivated those enzymes and everything would have been green. So I like that there's ageability to this, there's complexity, there's going to be some sweetness because of that oxidation. So yeah, this is kind of a new style, the 300-degree wok. And yeah, I like it.
Until recently, most people would consider these smaller satellite minority villages surrounding Lao Banzhang to be impoverished, nearly forgotten. But in the modern Banzhang kingdom, producing tea to be sold as Lao Banzhang has brought relative prosperity and even opulence to the greater area. In my experience, going to each of these villages for their specific tea can divorce those leaves from the more hyped name it often gets sold under, and therefore good Greater Banzhang area tea can be found without the insane price tag. This is true for Bakalong, perhaps the most, which doesn't have much acclaim riding on its own namesake. Driving away from Bakalong's strange suburbia feel, it made sense when we learned that it was in 2022 when the government ordered the demolition of old houses and modernized the little village of 50 or so households by constructing these new, more sanitary dwellings with attached tea processing units, so the locals could better support the area's tea industry. Not only is a massive Dai Yi tea plantation in its literal backyard, but just up the road is China's most counterfeit single-origin tea, the so-called King of Pu'er, Lao Banzhang. I first came to Lao Banzhang in 2019 when Da from Lao Mountain introduced me to Mr. Yang, a friend of hers who was also in the Han group. I've since gone back to visit them each time I've been in Yunnan, more for educational purposes rather than to source tea though. For rivers and lakes, though I've worked with this family by carrying their tea they produce from neighboring villages, I've never actually carried their official Lao Banzhang tea. As I've learned more and gotten to know the Yang family better, recently I've begun to reconsider that.
Hey tea friends, welcome to Lao Banzhang. We're at the address 103 with Mr. Yang's son, and there's 117 families, and so verifiably you must be associated with one of these families to even be let in. So we had to call him at the gate to be let in to Lao Banzhang. And let's get out of the road here a little bit. I had the privilege enough to meet his father in 2019, and here we are in 2025, just after the spring equinox, ready to enjoy some Lao Banzhang tea. Let's go. All right, so we made it to Lao Banzhang finally, and I first met Mr. Yang's son, who is above me harvesting tea in 2019. And seeing that in the last 30 years, Lao Banzhang tea has increased, I think, over 2,000%, in like an astronomical increase in value. It went from one of the most impoverished villages in this area to absolutely the most richest in Munghai County. And Mr. Yang's son above me, being only 23 years old, has not known anything but basically this level of opulence, whereas his father has seen such a dramatic shift from his tea, these ancient tree gardens that are 400 to 500 years old in his backyards, fetching only $1 per kilo some 30 years ago, to something so much higher. Okay, we're here with the big boss. This is Mr. Yang. I met him 6 years ago here, and he's number 103. His address is 103 of 117 addresses here in Lao Banzhang. And this man has seen so much change throughout his life. I mean, he went from in the 90s and early 2000s with tea being less than $1 a kilo to over 2,000 times that amount at this point. Just an insane amount of night and day growth here, exponential. I mean, the opulence here in Lao Banzhang is just crazy. It's a really interesting thing to see. And I would say that the tea backs it up. The tea is very, very good. And so we're grateful to be here with Mr. Yang.
Boasting one of the fastest price escalations in the history of agriculture, Lao Banzhang's meteoric rise from impoverished village to the king of Pu'er in just a handful of years could very well seem like the inside work of tea industry elites, scheming to buy low and sell high simply by crowning some arbitrary poor village during those early years of the Pu'er boom. That is, until you recognize that Lao Banzhang sits cradled in a mountain pass at an excellent 1,800 meters. has over 1,000 acres of impressive ancient tree gardens, with much of the trees being well above 400 years of age, producing strong, very distinctive character tea. While its crypto-level hype is indeed suspect, at least on paper there seems to be legitimate merit. And once a sea of counterfeits has been waded through and the genuine article has been found, the question becomes, is the high price worth it?
So we're trying to see the Chawang or the Tea King, but it is right now March 26th, and as of 10 days ago, they closed this due to the ecological impact of everyone just visiting. And this isn't the first idea of this concept of the Chawang, the Tea King, being loved to death. Something like, when I first visited, I think they told me something like 10,000 USD is what 1 kilo of Lao Banzhang Tea King tea was going for. And the Tea King being, 700, 800, 900, 1,000 years old, I forget which, is not a robust specimen enough to handle harvesting like that. So literally, this is kind of the second iteration of it being literally loved to death. I mean, I remember when in 2019, when I was here first, we got down to the Chawang, and it was the daughter of the owner of the Tea King tree. She was allowing her friends, who were like teenagers, in the gate, and she was not letting anyone else in, and they were just there taking TikToks. And I just remember at that time, 6 years ago, that was just so ridiculous, that level of hype and superficiality. But now I feel like that's just basically the norm. I mean, last year we were hanging out in Mr. Yang's mansion, and he has a hired crew of paparazzi, just like a camera crew. And anytime you do any sort of motion that is really interesting for them, they just pop off photos. And so we were trying to enjoy the tea, and we were just getting tons of photos of us taken, because they're trying to squeeze every single bit of spontaneous authenticity out of this experiencing of Lao Banzhang tea, and me looking like a foreigner, it being one of those.
Considering that the nearby villages covered earlier in this episode, while still not cheap, can be 4 to 8 times less expensive, it's naturally debated whether Lao Banzhang is truly the best pound-for-pound tea of the lot. Lao Banzhang is known for a synthesis of big intensity of flavor and aroma, immediate resalivation and long-lasting huigan, bitterness transforming into sweetness, and strong cha tea. And while enjoyable glimpses of this package of characteristics exist from teas from those other villages, none seem to have them as balanced and ratcheted up a couple of notches like good Lao Banzhang does. Let's go try some out.
All right, good to go? This is our first sip here of 2025 Spring Lao Banzhang tea, and I can already tell that the tea liquid is very light. So these first sips are going to be a little bit light, so let's check it out. Oh yeah, very typical Hmong high bitterness. Very much like, I've been drinking a lot of Bakanan, very similar to that. The bitterness, it hits you, but it doesn't stay and it doesn't hurt. It just turns into like this sweet, nice, strong. I mean, it's just that southern Bulang character, that southern Munghai County Bulang character. Love this style of tea. I mean, this character is what all the other villages want. It has that bitterness that transforms into sweetness. It has that immediate hoigan. The ancient trees are very old, so there's a minerality to it that, that lends that surface tension to the water when those minerals are in it, that has that aliveness that resalivates. As soon as you swallow that, the astringency on the mucosa of the cells in your jowls start to resalivate very much immediately. So while it is just overbearing initially, it's very brief, and then it's just a relief.
While the pu'er boom of the early 2000s eventually burst over an overvalued futures market that hinged on pu'er's ability to accrue value through aging, today's revived industry has pivoted to find a market willing to pay premiums for single-origin micro-terroirs, stratifying down to specific coveted gardens, select tree-grade pickings, and even exceptionally scarce single-tree teas. Today's prize pu'er seems to fetishize the tea's ability to age far less than it used to, with new batches often being promoted to be drank fresh, kind of like most other tea types.
All right, so fast forward, we're here on number 14, steep number 14, and I told her to brew it a little bit longer just to get the color out, but it's still pretty light. Honestly, throughout the entire session, it maintained this like nice, lovely yellow-green. And what that is really telling me, and the clarity is really, really nice as well. What that's telling me is that the wok frying step, the kilgreen, the shaching step, the heat's probably really, really high. And this is an industry standard. This is a trend that we're seeing where they bump up the temperature on that wok to really almost get a green tea-like experience where it's just wanting to be enjoyed very, very quickly after it's produced. The ageability, you seem to lose a little bit of that, but the market right now is just so voraciously consuming teas like this. They're not letting it age the 10, 15, 20, 30 years out of neglect that they used to back in the day. And so people are drinking year of tea very, very quickly. And so the production specs of tea like this, you can tell with the green color is reflecting that. And so while there is this one step in the ancient world with pu'er tea, of course, being a very ancient style, it's still being very, very much developed. And we see this here with on the precipice of pu'er production, Lao Banzhang, a very, very expensive, hyped area adapting to these needs. And yeah, it's been really, really delicious throughout. Honestly, that bitterness hasn't really affected us too much because it just transforms right into that sweetness. And we've noticed, we were talking about this, it's like our vision became more acute. The acuity of our vision is almost like a kaleidoscope of like all the little lights and the sun was coming in. It was just really, really nice just sitting here and experiencing this tea. So I think as much as it's a super expensive hype tea, it in some ways supports it in that it is a really good tea. It's not all just empty hype. So, yeah.
Especially in the West, without tea culture woven into our everyday societies, witnessing specialty tea through the lens of the internet can sometimes make the tea world seem rife with pedantic connoisseurs, virtue-signaling vendors with chosen one complexes, and culty gatekeepers with paranoid messaging. But in my experience, when you finally arrive at these Helen of Troy places that some drinkers and sellers from around the world root their identity and reputation in, you just find normal people that are living, less concerned with rhetoric and trends than they are with continuing their way of life. You share tea and a meal with them. And here it is, some of the most debated and sought after tea in the world, and their light, casual attitude towards it feels like a reminder to be in on some cosmic joke. At the same time, their history and relationship to tea runs so deep that any identity you may have formed as some knowledgeable tea person is appropriately shattered. Can folks from hyped villages continue to innovate incredible teas that demand high prices? Has Pu'er jumped the shark with its green tea processing? Will the industry be as different 30 years into the future as it is now from 30 years ago in the past? Who knows, but what will remain constant are these old gardens, these ancient people, and their timeless relationship to tea. If you find some in your cup, just enjoy it.